Okay, fourth graders, here's lesson 3 for chapter 4. I can use remainders to, represent a fraction of a whole, add 1 to the quotient, or simply answer the question. So, the name of the game today is going to be interpreting that remainder and figuring out how we can use it to answer our question. It's always going to depend on what the word problem is about and what the question is asking. Okay. Here we go. You do not have to write all of this down, only write down what I underline. Magda has some leftover wallpaper, 73 inches long. She wants to cut it into 8 pieces to use around the photos in her scrapbook. Each piece will have equal length. How long will each piece be? So you should write down 73 inches long. Cut it into 8 pieces. Each piece will have equal length. How long will each piece be? That's what you need to write down. Now, this is the name of the game today, down here. When you solve a division problem with a remainder, the way you interpret the remainder depends on the situation and the question, just like I said before, right? So let's think about Magda here. She has leftover wallpaper, actually, to be exact, 73 inches of it, and she wants to cut it into 8 equal pieces, right? She wants to know how long will each piece be. Well, let me think. I'm going to use my counting number and multiple strategy. So I'm going to start, I know 8 times 8 is 64, so I'm going to start with counting number 8. The multiple is 64. Okay, let's keep going. 8 times 9 is 72. Okay, I need to at least get my dividend or higher, so 8 times 10 is 80. Okay, so the counting number 9 is closest. How far away am I from my dividend? 1, right? So my quotient is 9. I'm 1 away from my multiple, so the remainder is 1, right? Now, how long will each piece be? Well, paper, you don't have to just cut whole inches, right? You could take a fraction of an inch. So actually, my remainder, right, I will have 1/8 of an inch, right? So look what I did. The divisor became my denominator. My remainder, right, became my numerator, right? Because each person will get 9 inches of leftover wallpaper and then 1/8 of an inch, right? Because 8/8 would equal that 1 remaining inch. Okay? So, again, in this scenario, right, you can cut paper into fractions, okay, of an inch. That's how I knew to use our remainder as a fraction, right, in this problem. So, my final answer would be each piece would be 9 1/8 inches long. So really any problem where you can, cut up pieces of bread, pieces of paper, string, right? Anything like that where you can cut it any length, right? A fraction of an inch, a fraction of a foot, anything like that. You can use a fraction as your remainder. Remember, your divisor is the denominator. Your remainder becomes the numerator. Let's look at another problem. Ben is a haunted house tour guide. He can take no more than 7 people at a time on a tour. There are 80 people in line. Oh my gosh. So again, take no more than 7 people at a time, 80 people in line. The question is, how many groups of 7 people will Ben show around? So really they're asking, how many groups of 7 are there in 80? Right? So again, counting number, multiple. I know 10 times 7 is 70. 11 times 7 is 77. 12 times 7 is 84. There we go. Now, which one is closest to 80 without going over? 77. So my quotient's going to be 11. Right? How do I get from 77 to 80? Well, there'd be a remainder of 3, right? To get from 77 to 80, I add 3 more. So my quotient is 11 and my remainder is 3. But let's look back at the question to figure out how we can interpret that remainder. How many groups of 7 people? Well, he will only have 11 groups of 7 people. 3 people will kind of be left out, I guess. But to answer this question, how many groups of 7 people? 11 groups of 7 people. So in this question, we kind of didn't use the remainder, right? We couldn't cut people into fractional parts. That wouldn't be any good, right? Which is why I didn't use it as a fraction. Let's look at another question. It's the same scenario, right? It's just a different question this time. So, you don't need to write the important information again for the word problem, right? Just the question. If Ben gives the tour to all 80 people, how many tours will he give? Well, from our last problem, right, we found out 80 divided by 7 is, double check, 11 remainder 3. Right? If he gives 11 tours, that's only 77 people. What about these guys? What about these 3 people? They feel sad they didn't get their tour, right? So really, if he gives tour to all 80 people, he will actually have to give 12 tours. He'll give 11 tours to 7 people, and then his last tour, he would have these 3 friends. They get like a special small group tour. So my final answer would be, if he gave a tour to all 80 people, he would give 12 tours. Now this time, I had to add 1 to my quotient, right, to get my final answer. Again, it all depends on the situation and the question they're asking. Let's try one more together. Same scenario, different question. Ben gives tours to all 80 people. All right. After he completes the tours for groups of 7, how many people are in his last tour? We talked about that, right? So again, 80 divided by 7 is 11, remainder 3, right? That means he would give 11 tours of 7 people, and then 3 people, right, would be left out or be given the last tour. So this question is, how many people are in his last tour? Well, these 3 friends. That would be how many people would be in his last tour. So this time, we use the remainder as really our answer. So feel free to go through these again, right, to have some extra practice for how to interpret the remainder, but it really just depends on the situation. You can use your remainder as a fraction if it's something you can cut up into pieces, right? Yarn, wallpaper, loaf of bread, right? If it's people you're dealing with, right, you can't really cut those up. You're going to have to interpret it, hey, what are they really asking for me to find? Okay, here are your practice problems. There's only 2 of them. Joanna has 70 beads. She uses 8 beads for each bracelet. She makes as many bracelets as possible. How many beads will Joanna have left over? Okay, that should be a big hint how to use that remainder. A teacher wants to give 3 markers to each of her 25 students. Markers come in packs of 8. How many packages of markers will the teacher need? Okay, don't leave any students out. They'd be very sad. They want to know how many packages they would need to give all 25 students 3 markers. Okay, have a great night. We'll talk about it tomorrow.